Good evening from beautiful Bunurong country. We are broadcasting to you live here on Radio Karam from the ancient Karam Karam swampland on unceded Eastern Kulin Nation land. As always, welcome back for another evening of radio architecture. My guest and conversation partners this evening are Anna Nervegna and Toby Reed. Nervegna Reed Architecture is an award-winning architecture practice established by Anna Nervegna and Toby Reed in 2004. NR projects include the Arrow Studio, the Victorian Quakers Centre, PEP Dandenong, social housing and community projects in regional Victoria, Melbourne, Hobart and urban planning in China. NR's design for the Central Goldfields Art Gallery has been widely published and was exhibited in the 2023 Venice Architecture Biennale and won the Royal Australian Institute of Architects John George Knight Award for Heritage Architecture and an award in the Best Public Building category in the 2A Awards Dubai. NR's extended their architectural dialogue with writing and the making of architectural documentaries and videos. They have guest edited to a magazine and Architecture Victoria, and recently Toby contributed to the chapter Screenness to the book The Physical and the Digital City, published by Intellect in London and Chicago. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thanks, Ilana.
2 weeks in a row, listeners on Radio Architecture are treated to another 2-on-1 interview where a collaborative pair and a life partnership pair are joining me for an interview, and it's, I think, really, really special, and all listeners are very, very grateful to have an opportunity to learn about such a unique collaboration.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
There's a question I like to ask all my guests, and that is, what is your earliest memory of a building or place?
Earliest memory?
Yeah. I mean, I sort of grew up in London, so I was born here, but my earliest memory is all in London, and I suppose we had a really nice white house in Islington, and Mum was an architect, so she had all blow-up clear furniture, pop art sort of posters everywhere, so it's a very 60s kind of experience, I suppose. So yeah, it's just that kind of very much like Blow Up, the old Antonioni movie. And then we came back to Australia and I went to Press Hill, which is a kind of alternative school that Kevin Borland designed, and it was straight into this kind of almost hippie sort of utopian thing in the middle of Melbourne. So they're my 2 sort of strong early memories, this sort of swinging London and then sort of hip, sort of kind of hippie Melbourne. I think
Architecture is in your blood and in your genetics and in your mother's milk, truly, as well. So you had a sense of design from birth, would you say? Or?
Yeah, look, I mean, there was a lot of architects in my family. A lot of them sort of, old and dead now, But
how many generations?
Oh, no, just one generation, but then there was quite a few with all my grandfather's cousins and, like a lot of other Melbourne architects. So, yeah, I mean, I had an auntie who was an architect in India, and she and her husband had a firm, husband and wife firm in Delhi that, they'd worked for Le Corbusier, and they designed the Expo 70 Indian Pavilion, which was like the greatest expo ever, I think, the most visionary expo. And so there's just like lots of interesting things like that. But yeah, I don't. It's not exactly like we grew up with a firm to inherit or anything like that. There was none of that. Like we just sort of end up doing it ourselves.
How about you, Anna? What's your earliest memory?
Well, I think, my parents are migrants, so I'm first generation Australian, and my father, who was not able to be educated, really valued creativity and architecture and art. So he was always sharing that interest with us, and he was designing a new family home, and he built the model out of bricks downstairs, and we all had a involvement in that, and he would take us to all the merchant builder display homes as a weekend activity, and so we kind of grew this passion towards spatial relationships in domestic design and their potential. So that kind of captured my imagination. But when I was 14, we went to Italy, and he was dragging us to all what felt like every church in Italy. And then one day it was behind a scaffold, and it was the Pantheon, and it was a surprise to see that space other than a kind of church space, and it was raining. And it just shook me to the core that I thought it was deliberately raining in this building, and it was meant to be there. And I thought, this is kind of the power of this space. So it kind of made me aware of architecture, and I was fairly hooked from that day.
I'm instantly struck by that image of the circle. It seems to come back in some of your more recent projects.
Yeah, it does.
We'll jump into the projects later in the conversation. Absolutely. Yeah. But did you know then from those early teenage years that you wanted to be an architect?
I did. I don't think I had the confidence to actually say it. Like, it was there. It was not like I was raised like maybe a good career would be being a school teacher or something, that was a great achievement, and that it might be a bit out there to study architecture, but it just kept kind of coming to the surface until the point where I did apply and studied at RMIT. Yeah.
Is that where you both met?
Yeah, it is. So we did kind of grow up on architecture in a way that, our relationship really is based on a common respect and knowledge of creativity and form making and art and everything. And so that then has permeated our family life, and our two children are, quite comfortable in it, and they've both become, one's a sculptor and one's an artist. And so it's how we kind of relate to each other and support each other. Yeah.
In a beautiful creative home.
Yes.
And
we tried to
too many artworks.
Distract one of the children to not be an artist, to maybe think of law or something sensible. But I think it is a real calling that you can't you can deny it to a point and be told, you've got to be practical and have a career path and all this. But in the end, it does, the creativity is a bit of a calling, and you can't deny it because you're kind of denying a big side of yourself,
I find also anything you try to avoid will absolutely come back to you.
Yes.
Certainly in those creative ways.
Yeah.
If you try to suppress your voice as an artist, it will return.
Yeah. So there's several voices in our family, and they're very dynamic, and we always kind of show each other what we're doing. So we show the kids our buildings, and they show us their work, and
they kind of keep us up to date, I've got to say.
Yeah, they do keep us up to date, and they keep us on our toes. They keep us like thinking about what's contemporary and what is the right thing to be doing now or spending time on and so forth. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Toby, what was it like growing up with such a well-known and really famous voice such as your mum?
Look, she wasn't that well-known or famous when I was growing up. What it was like was, because at the time, she did like 3 years of architecture, then I was born, and then when my parents got divorced, when I was about 5 or 6 or something, we came back to Australia, and she decided to go back and study the other 3 years. And so after that, it was very much like she started the whole women in architecture thing, and it was basically in our living room. So there was it was very political, there was lots of political discussions about equality and how to sort of make the profession better and everything. And when we were kids and living in London, I remember Mum went to Paris one time, and it happened to be the 68 riots in Paris. So she experienced all of that. And I think somehow that kind of rubbed off subconsciously, because it was a very sort of political time throughout our teenage years and everything. And obviously us kids were all into punk rock and stuff, so it kind of all gelled in a way, I think, at the time. Then
Yeah.
later on, she sort of did things, like took over, became the first female president of the institute and all that. So that, and that was really good for all of us.
I think paving the way not just for women architects to be more prominent in the profession, but for the built environment to be in the next level and be more conscious of the outcomes and urban planning and having a consideration for the city. So many things that she did touch on, which was quite extraordinary, really, and. I think Melbourne's a better place from it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Would you say Dimity also set the foundation for your practice in terms of perhaps ideas or?
I don't know what Toby thinks, but I feel that...
I mean, all parents influence kids, and so she was very much pushing us towards ideas and culture at a very young age, I'd say. So even when we were really, really young, she'd take us to amazing exhibitions or performances. She took me to a Russell and Kirk concert when I was like 9 or something, and he was playing like 3 saxophones at once, and then we went and met him backstage, and it was just like, this was the most full-on free jazz experience. And she'd just do things like that. So it was more about just provocation, that not just to do things to fit in, but actually to do things that make people think. And we're just brought up.
Rules to live by. Yeah. This is rules to parent by.
Well, otherwise, you can have a family life that is very safe and solid, and happy and all that. But somehow, if you're in the creative world, you need to kind of shake that cage a bit and think, well, surely there's stuff on the edges of things, So I think that was important to both of us, and Dimity obviously led the way.
How did you know it was time to start your own practice together and go ahead on your own?
Kind of happened by accident, didn't it?
Kind of happened by accident, because I don't think we planned to actually work together when we were young. We just wanted to express and create spaces and form or, situations that were interesting or exploring things, And then I think we were in different practices. Like we worked together for Corrigan when we were students, just to endure the hard work and the experience of it all.
Badge of honour as martyrdom.
Yes. And, with Corrigan it was great because we did work on set design and, it was kind of a variety of things. It was a long slog of a day, but I think when you're young, you just think this is great.
What's the biggest lesson Corrigan left you with?
Shock value, I'd say.
I think...
always try to keep people, shock them out of their sort of humdrum reality and make people think about, where they're living in the world.
Mm.
I think he taught me, you have a tenacity for architecture, you can, refine and respect that and, not be, he might have been a forceful character, but you could just kind of help share that with people that might not really know the intention, but you can explain that in time. But that was not through him teaching us, it was just experiencing perhaps the opposite and then thinking, well, maybe, it could be explored in a more gentle way, but just as effective, that kind of thing.
We don't have to do everything our mentor showed us.
I mean, years later we were asked to make the documentary on Corrigan and Maggie and for an exhibition that was happening, and we sort of felt like, it's like you'd been in the Vietnam War and got away, and then someone was sending you back again, and we thought, oh my God, how are we going to do this,
Yeah.
And we kept talking to Peter and saying, we'd like to talk about this, and nah, what about this? Well, nah. And then he'd say, well, we'll just turn up. And he just would never, in the end, turn
So I
up to the
think
studio.
He refused to be in the documentary.
He
is that
wanted,
right?
he wanted to be. He loved it when it was finished and
He was
everything.
very.
But
I think he was probably
perverse.
self-conscious. He'd had some illness and
Yeah, he was sick.
But we then decided, and this can be a tactic that we do with design as well. Is we did everything around it to actually highlight the person that we were talking about, and in the end, it was well received. He used to take people up from the office to go see the film when it was being exhibited, and he was very pleased and happy with it. But some people can be very strong, but then they can't. They're camera shy and they just don't want to do it. And it's fair enough.
He was a funny guy, but what happened out of that, like him not turning up, was that in the end, Maggie became the star, and it became much more of an interesting angle on how to show describe the practice. It became a whole sort of subversive history of Edmund and Corrigan, which he was a bit scared to see when he first, he was like, oh, finally went and saw it, and then he loved it, but we were all saying things that he didn't want us to say. If he'd been the centre of it.
And it's quite light-hearted. It is for, anyone can watch that film and enjoy it. It's not, super high architect speak, and it's not theoretical or anything, but it unfolds, because we understand the architecture, it unfolds the ideas about his work that people might not really acknowledge. So I always tell my students, go and watch that film, because it's, it's an educational tool, and they can have a little laugh and learn about someone new, which is always good.
We're currently broadcasting not far down the road from the Keysborough Church of the Resurrection.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we're very close to a local Edmund and Corrigan project that listeners can probably
drive past it often?
Often on the way to Garden World and Bunnings.
Okay.
I do love Garden World.
They would have loved. Peter would have loved that location.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to ask, had you made a film before? Were you at all nervous jumping into filmmaking?
Well, I'd sort of been brought up with it because my father was a director, and so I'd sort of always been around that, and that was another important thing for my childhood. He'd made this film called Long Weekend that was one of the first ever environmental horror films, and it was, it was an amazing movie. Australians didn't like it much because it didn't depict Australia in a very nice way, but it was very sort of popular overseas, and so it's... we were kind of brought up with it in a way, and I was a bit nervous at first, thinking, how do you present architecture in a way that is not, grand designs, So we're thinking, got to make something that's kind of anti-grand designs, like the opposite. And so then we thought, okay, the idea is to treat it like, show the things in architecture that people don't see, but create the architecture like the architectural drawings. So we put all the people talking in the drawings, and so they're kind of talking in the working drawings and in the perspectives, and that way you see it kind of another side, a hidden side to architecture, which is what creates the buildings but not the finished product, and it created a different look. It was much more of a kind of collage look, but
I think we always
made it easy.
Speak in like metaphors or something. So when we kind of finished architecture, there was a recession. We travelled for a year and came back, and it was still no work. And so we started teaching and studying extra. So Toby did a master's in film, and I did some postgraduate studies. But we always talked about ideas for, say if you're designing a house, like our own house, we were talking about other ideas that we wanted to bring in that wasn't just archie speak, So, we wanted to see if we could have a filmic experience, a particular one, within our house. So we kind of took that on board, and we did do it. And
we ended up with way too many stairs, probably.
But it kind of, that's how we would often talk to each other about designing something. It might not be something you tell the council or the client or whatever, but in time, once you get that trust, you can say that's the creative discussion we're having. It may not just be about it. Certainly, there'll be references in architecture, but we might be talking about film or painting or something, and that can inform how we design that particular project.
Absolutely. Architecture is all about ideas.
Yeah. And I think, just seeing where it can extend to. So, where a project can, or where architecture can extend into other areas like interior design or landscape design, but it can extend into ideas about installation or media, but it might not be that visible, but it's a generator to the thing.
Do you have a grey area or a extended discipline that you haven't explored yet and you'd like to? What is it, the age-old adage, you're not an architect until you've designed a chair?
Yeah, we don't.
Well, we haven't done that.
No, we want to.
M Pavilion chair competition, I believe, is annual.
Yeah,
That's right.
No, we love chairs. They're really useful.
I think the chair is good.
I mean, that point about the media is that, like, the cinema and the media has really infiltrated everyone's consciousness so much. So we have consistently explored how that changes the way you might design spaces, and so I think that's probably a recurring thing that we keep looking at. But we
when we
look
were
at
young, we did an exchange with RMIT into China. This was before people just went to China. And so it was like they sent a few lecturers and a group of 15 of us went. And what we really learnt from the Chinese design is this notion of space and the illusion of space that they might have in their gardens or buildings that they used to call it a borrowed view. And so we always like to do that in our projects where we might design, like we designed a little house that's narrow and kind of attempt to make that house seem more spacious because we can afford space and it's not unavailable, and that way we had the rooms flow into each other and it does feel so much more spacious than the little cottage that got pulled down.
But I'd say generally we can always make a space feel bigger than it really is.
Yeah.
It's just something that we do have a knack for.
We pride ourselves on pushing the budget in terms of being very thoughtful about the cost and what the client is investing, but also how can we maximise this program? Because often the client might say, I want this, that and the other, but they might not foresee what they might need in 5 years. And so it's good to say, well, what happens down the track, when your kids grow up or your mother-in-law might come and live with you or whatever, and try and be mindful of maximising,
And thinking about that future, thinking about that flexibility.
Yeah.
That all comes into the equation.
So then the house doesn't feel disposable, like it will upgrade in 6 years, that it can be a place that you stay for, 20 years, and it can be something that grows with the family, not
an aging
that you
place.
outgrow it,
What does good design mean to you?
Super hard, that one. I mean, because it's lots of different things. There's so many different types of designers. For us, I mean, for me anyway, I like design that kind of provokes ideas and, like in a spatial way. I'm not thinking like a space. I like a space that creates ideas, but you're not totally aware of them. Okay, so it's not a literal translation from something you'd write down or see in a film or whatever. It's really got to provoke you, I think, in a different way and make you feel new experiences. So you're more aware of your day-to-day life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think there's some self-realisation with good design. So you might walk into a space and feel that acknowledgement that you are in this environment and it's supporting you and it's not going to kind of drive you crazy or whatever. So it's life affirming in a way, and then on a kind of more detailed level, that things are logically placed and resolved and streamlined in terms of how the functions of the building go.
It works.
Yeah,
But that's almost the bare minimum, right?
That is
it is
basics.
the bare
I
minimum,
mean,
but
we always tried.
you want
to elevate
both.
that.
Yeah,
you want both.
You want the unexpected.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I mean, not every building needs that, but that's just kind of what we're probably better at doing. You know, you got to work on what you're good at.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well, the unexpected could be this idea of it being spacious, or it doesn't have to be hitting you in the head, but it's something that's like, wow, I really didn't think I was going to get this. So we often get clients saying, did you think it was going to be like this? And obviously as a designer you think, yes.
I planned all of it.
That's how I saw it, but there is an element of surprise,
Yeah.
a pleasant surprise that they get. Like
Probably a good domestic example is we did that house for Anna Pappas, who was a gallery director, in 2004 to 2009, right? Yeah, a long time ago. And then she moved to Greece eventually and sold it to some new clients, and they wanted garage in the backyard, and that was going to cut the backyard in half, and the whole internal spaces had been organised so that the outside was, part of the inside space, internal space. And so we thought, look, the best way to deal with this is we designed a kind of moon door as a back wall, so it's like a translucent wall with which lights up at night amongst the jungle sort of backyard with a giant sort of moon shape in it, which cuts in half. It's like half on the door and half on the wall. So if you move the door, it becomes a half moon. But it was just an unexpected way of dealing with this idea of if we put a brick wall there, the space would all feel so claustrophobic. So that we want to keep that sense of space.
And it glows too in the evening as well.
Yeah, and it's really...
it's that illusion that
Yeah.
we wanted to have an illusion that their garden was bigger than it was. And we all want that.
Yeah.
You want your living room to feel bigger, appear to be bigger than what is actually built. And so with this garden, we kind of went, well, if we make the wall translucent and glowing, then it will feel more of an illusion that the garden edge is not so defined.
A learning from your trip to China, perhaps, with the moon door.
Probably.
Yeah, probably.
And also our kind of love of art probably came into that too. But, it's a very tiny budget. I'd say it was...
That was small. I mean,
250,000 or something. But the result, because they own a winery, the terrace above is to have restaurateurs come and sample their wines.
Wow.
So it kind of gives them that kind of atmosphere that it's not just, a terrace on top of a roof. It's everything's been sculpted and considered, so it feels, unique. And
every project is a design opportunity, no matter how small. My guests on the program keep repeating that.
Yeah, definitely.
Universally.
I mean, some of our best things are the cheapest things.
Is that because of the pressure to design better, really?
You just get more exact, I think. I think we try always do like the best result with the least manoeuvres,
Yeah.
And so, you just want to get, it's trying to be exact in the most precise way possible.
And
geometrically,
just being respectful,
spatially.
I think respectful of the budget and respectful of the object or the form, that, the challenge is there, and we do like a challenge. So it's like we don't need multi-million-dollar projects, even though we'd love them. But the idea is that we can achieve great things also with small budgets, and clients can be very happy with that,
Yeah.
not feel like it's second best.
I mean, we're doing a project in Shepparton at the moment, and it's a much bigger budget. It's the Shepparton Club, but the actual gestures are quite simple, aren't they?
Yeah.
But they're really effective so far, and so I think it's just this matter of trying to do the minimum manoeuvre for the most result, of maximum result.
effect.
Maximum effect.
Yeah. So that we did a house in Richmond, and she was an Olympiad judo player, and she was just lovely, Carly, and she. We talked about her history when we first met, and then we were talking about judo, and I said, what you're doing in that judo sport is what we're actually doing in design.
We're wrestling with it, yeah.
Yeah. Which
Trying
is
to get the maximum with the most minimum effort, like whether it's a small budget or, not being overly complicated and...
the quickest way to throw your kid over your shoulder is, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
But, I mean, those ceilings were all calculated so you could do that.
Yeah, she's got a judo room in the basement of this home.
Yeah.
And, we had to calculate the heights and all that. But, it was a great project. And they were, once we connected on that, they were very trusting in that we knew what her agenda was, So it was good.
You understand what's important. They're doing a lot with a little, but still a dramatic effect. It's almost that the moon returns for you in your Castlemaine project, is it? Where there's almost the Harry Seidler's kind of M from Monash Gallery appears to be rotated 90 degrees. But it also seems like the same moon.
Yeah.
Well, the moon thing happened in reverse there because we'd designed the other project, then it went on hold. And so we thought, let's just do it here.
Yeah.
And then it came back, and so we got
I mean, that was a great project in that it started off as a very small tender to put a ramp in a fire station kind of garage.
It was a bit more than that.
And it kind of then got more budgets to work towards something bigger. In the end, it was $2.5 million, I think. But it was an extraordinary experience because we hadn't really done heritage, and we felt that the budget was so minuscule because we had to have climate control, archive for the art facilities, proper gallery hanging walls and lighting, and we're just thinking, and so we'd be in the car and I'd be saying to Toby, let's just think of the budget like we're actually taking things away rather than sticking things into the building and making that clear kind of clarity of all the spaces really did help organise the gallery in a great way. And then there was a kind of...
Well, the building was like a rabbit warren, so we thought instead of designing with a pencil, we'll design with a rubber, So we created spaces through deleting things.
Yeah, it really was overwhelmingly chaotic.
Yes.
But now it's this clear kind of, journey through a gallery where you view different spaces and the archive and the education room, and then out to the Indigenous garden, which was a great experience for us because we'd never done that kind of Wataka consultancy kind of workshop. So, it was a positive
it was great.
thing all round. Often we are doing things because we love it, not because it's our day job. We do probably spend too much time doing the work we do, but it's just how we operate. Our office is very collaborative, and we like to discuss every design decision with everyone, but we do have a kind of, Toby and I have a conceptual parameter that we know we're working towards. So
that's very generous and inclusive to want to share in those design decisions.
Yeah, I think because we have taught a lot, I think that it's a great way to engage with the staff and not make them feel like... We don't like the idea that it's us and them. We want to feel like it's,
it's like
equal.
A studio kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a studio feeling,
Yeah.
What's the biggest lesson you try and impart on your students, or that you feel, particularly this current generation of students that you're working with, really needs to know what you want them to know?
I think it's, architecture really is about learning to think, to critically think and solve problems that might not be available to most people. And I've found over the years that the students can be a little bit less engaging about that, not really wanting to grapple with that. And I think that's what, RMIT in the time we were there and Corrigan and all that did kind of really put that at the forefront. Whereas now there's been a bit of a shift. So I'm always trying to pass it on. I don't know about you, Toby.
No, I kind of agree. I mean, the thinking is the integral thing, because all the other stuff can be taken over by AI and everything.
Yeah.
Like all the sort of stuff which takes like
The grunt work.
Generic thinking.
Yeah.
Like generic thinking is easy, and now we don't need to do it ourselves. So, so I think you've got to be able to think differently. You've got to look at a problem and think about it like the normal way and then another way. You've got to look at it from different perspectives, a bit like Scorsese's characters in Goodfellas. You've got to keep flipping from the gangster to the husband to the wife, and just see all the different ways of looking at an issue and solving it in different ways, And so, I think that's the main thing we try to teach the students when we do teach them, it's not just about, I suppose, like a Beaux-Arts type of thing of learning proportions and things. You've got to learn that too, but you just got to, I think that's, sorry, I'm getting confused here, but architects, like often people think architects can only do the type of building that they keep doing, so you specialise, you just do, sports centres, or you just do swimming pools, or you just do churches or whatever. But really what architects are good at is thinking anything, and applying it. So I think it doesn't really matter whether you've done one before or not. It's the idea of learning how to think differently and also boringly as well. Like you've got to think both ways, so you get it all right.
There's the practical and the magic.
There's so many.
You've got to somehow put them together.
There's so many things that have to reconcile, from all the different regulations, whether it be fire regs or, DDA or, like engineering. All these different things have to come together, and you've got to orchestrate it. And so you've really got to be able to see things from different perspectives, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You were on the edge of your seat there, Anna, but that's...
No, I agree. I think it's a very difficult thing to describe, but our culture is reliant on creative people to understand that it's not just delivering a kind of problem-solved building that could be taken out of a computer with no human involved. So all the buildings throughout history and that surround us that actually are considered important to our culture need to have that input, and I think that's the strong point for the designer to cultivate.
How do you have any feeling as to how do we advocate for that value or prevent the IA-ification to invent a word of our profession or the world in general, because there would be a really hard one to roll back if all thinking was eliminated.
I think it might happen and then it'll bounce back. I think we can only lead by example, and we can just keep doing the work we do that we believe in, and use those kind of computer tools to assist in the work. But I think society will realise that there's a portion of buildings that do require that extra kind of creativity and thought and resolution that a person can give rather than a
machine.
I hope so.
Well, I think like all our cities, and I mean it's more noticeable in China and places like that, but it's really noticeable here too. Our cities are just kind of growing, and it's like no matter how many town planners you might have or different politicians trying to regulate stuff, everything is happening like ants' nests appearing in the desert. It's like no one's quite sure who's controlling it. and so the results are kind of really chaotic. It's like everyone, so many millions of decisions. And so we kind of get these cities which are kind of just happening. And it's a bit like Koolhaas's essay, Junk Space, where the metaphor is like, cities are just like space junk now, It's
They have
like,
their own energy too.
Yeah, they're just self-propelling.
Yeah.
They're just sort of almost being built by themselves. And so that's kind of what's happening to the modern city. And you need kind of architects to go and work out how the hell do you interface with this,
Especially
and keep it human,
Especially in this moment of housing crisis.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
you're doing projects in the social housing space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that discussion also relies on, politicians and urban designers to support infrastructure and the economy that can allow for the city to grow in a way that is remarkable. We're just growing. I just feel it's not remarkable,
No,
and
decisions are always made about getting re-elected and all that. And so
Yeah.
it's just, it's not really...
You can go to
fixing-
cities that have preserved their remarkable nature.
Yeah.
Like you
And have a
go-
legacy in that.
Yeah.
Like you go to, Venice 40 years ago and Venice next week, and it is somehow being, respected and preserved. And I would have thought that Melbourne would have had a bit of that in the mix, but it seems to be more about the growing economy and money rather than...
This may be a really hard question, but what would you have done differently in Melbourne? And if you still could, what would you do?
Well, you'd certainly have less high-rise and less suburbia, I suppose, and more sort of medium density, like...
But also
Yeah,
the
like
plot ratio
Berlin
in
and
the city.
Paris, I just think that, you need more kind of
Yeah.
good urban sort of low-scale
Just
areas.
the density in Melbourne, in our CBD, is overwhelming. It feels like Hong Kong. And we were in Tokyo a few weeks ago, and it's like I always imagined, I've been to Tokyo a few times. In my mind, I think it's more hectic
Yes.
than Melbourne, but it's actually more relaxed on street level. So
Yeah.
somehow they've worked out how to have the density but not have it impacting that footpath. And, now it seems to be Melbourne, when you go somewhere, you've got to allow an hour to drive there if you're going across town or whatever. And that...
It's the
To
magic
me-
hour. It doesn't even matter what direction anymore. If you're driving,
No.
if you're in a
Just an
train,
hour.
it's always an
Everything's an
hour.
hour.
And,
Everything's an hour.
I remember that was what people said about Jakarta years ago, but it's not something I would have thought should happen to Melbourne, So,
Yeah. I just think, it's just dumb politicians and, other people. But it's not really, architects aren't really in control, that we're very powerless in a lot of ways. And a lot of architects that do sort of big buildings are really, a lot of it's been designed by the developer, and then you just sort of make him look good. It's like
Yeah.
the big decisions aren't really being done by the right people, I don't think. But we should get on to something more interesting, maybe. It's a bit too depressing.
we're probably not.
Yeah, we don't do many
experiencing
big
that.
buildings. Yeah, we're just looking at it. Yeah.
How have you found working in the social housing space? And
I think, we've taken it on board, like, it feels, really rewarding to, we did kind of
Family violence units.
we did a little hub with the food bank.
Oh, that
and
one,
then in Benalla, and then we did women at risk housing, temporary housing in Hobart. And even though the budget is lean and the parameters are somewhat unusual, like I think the outcome was really rewarding. That we were, you just feel when you're doing it that you're improving someone's situation, which is all an architect really wants to do.
yes,
And have a cause, and somehow doing that, it really made us feel like, okay, it's it's very lean, but we've still got this great site, and we can do an arrangement that is with dignity. So these women who are fleeing a situation with their children, perhaps, can have a situation where they feel safe and protected and not too much at risk until they get rehoused again.
Working in both the rural context as well and interstate in Hobart, and also coming out of the Corrigan training, Corrigan apprenticeship, Corrigan culture, what would you say, and is there an Australian architecture?
Yeah, I'm not really a nationalistic person. You know, I don't like to be too nationalistic. But there are certain things which seem Australian, but you then find them overseas too.
I think what we can
you
say
know,
is that the Australian architecture scene or design scene, particularly, we're more familiar with the Melbourne scene, is very strong. It's not like people don't care. Like, we've got a lot of colleagues and friends that are very passionate about their work, and so that to me makes it Australian rather than a style. Or we did edit that magazine.
Yeah, look, it's not, but all those people are working and doing good buildings. It's hard to know how conscious people are thinking, we're doing an Australian building, because it's sort of become a global economy, hasn't it? And so everyone's influenced by things from everywhere, but maybe over time there'll be a sort of different flavour to Australian architecture from other places. But we're sort of a bit against the kind of cliched idea of the Australian architecture where everything, like Glenn Murcutt's buildings have become like the symbol of the Australian house, So I think we react against that a bit. So the Arrow Studio was very much about that. It was a bit about my sort of contact with Kevin Borland as a kid, but also about this idea of the modernist luxury shared as a luxury house for rich people. So we kind of did this sort of minimalist, artist studio in the shape of an arrow, and so it's trying to sort of, I suppose, critique that a little bit, because I think as soon as you fall into this idea of say the Murcutt House as a kind of the Australian architecture, then it becomes an orthodoxy, and I think it sort of closes off things. It becomes too much of a dominant ideology, I think, and it cuts off other narratives, I think.
In the future, what will they call this moment, do you think, stylistically, that we're in?
Yeah, that's
or is the contemporary label going to go for a very, very long time? Do you have a feeling?
Yeah, what do you think? I mean, because we've gone beyond all this sort of parametric stuff, and it's hard to know. I mean, there's very much the environmental crisis. Everyone's thinking about that, so a lot of people are pulling back and saying, well, things can't look good, because if they're looking good, then they must not be good for the environment. And I don't believe in that at all. I still think you've got to make people think, you've got to make people happy, so we can't have everything looking like they're kind of Danish prisons, So, I mean, but there is very much this sort of environmental crisis and global warming and everything making people panic and thinking, my God, what do we do design-wise?
It's a huge topic to be addressed, and I think
it is,
you can have your cake and eat it too. You can address all those sustainable issues that you want to have in a project and still have that expression of space or form that you want to have. I do think we are running in the right direction as designers. I think the more diverse is better. Just for architects' survival in the future, I think it is a good thing to have diversity and not have everyone do one style or whatever. And I think, it's certainly been around for thousands of years, and it will endure, I'm hoping,
You mean architecture as a profession?
Yeah, just the importance of architecture.
Yes.
I mean, I think we do know other countries privilege and honour architecture more than Australia does, like France. Like their kids in school will be taught about architecture of the Pompidou, and they're quite aware at 7 or whatever that that's a thing going on in their world. But I hope that might happen in Australia. So people want to privilege and look after the built environment and the environment, and acknowledge what buildings are improving our lives.
Completely. Just picking up on one of your earlier points about good design being in enhancing your everyday life and moment, but really also connecting you to where you are. And some say the definition of true sustainability is actually bringing it back to that connection to place that allows that architecture to endure. So
the place.
If we're connected to place and to what we're designing, then the architecture will be preserved and looked after, and then it becomes that next legacy that people care about their environment.
I agree. I think the kind of respect and acknowledgement of the context of the site or the situation that you've put this program into is definitely really important, and that backs up this idea of culture and sustainability at the same time. So it can be rewarding if it's a house or a school or a church or whatever. It can endure, and not be dismissed.
Yeah. I mean, placemaking and that kind of genius loci and everything, they've always been important to architects. There's obviously some who are better at it than others, and so there's some really bad examples of things which just don't work in a certain place, throughout history. But it's super important. Like but you've also got to look at place in many different ways, don't you? I think not just a textbook way, but you've got to try to find new ways of investigating it.
Yeah, and that can resolve things like, you might get many clients that say, I want a 4-bedroom house, garage and store shed or whatever. They might come with the same program, and it's up to us to devise a solution or a proposition that suits the family but also suits the site and the context, which can at the same time be exploring something about architecture that most people don't think about. So it's like a double parallel kind of investigation. I can solve the problem of the house plan, but behind the scenes I'm trying to explore what it is about architecture that I'm exploring at that time.
If we go back to the Maryborough Gallery, right, I think as far as place goes and this idea, what we were trying to do there was this idea of almost look at the subconscious of the place, as if you're sort of going, you're sort of cutting through the skin and going beyond and seeing something that's been repressed. And so and particularly as we were working with the Dja Warong and they were doing the garden and we were doing the building, and so we, rather than sort of restore the 19th century building the way that they would have in the 1980s, where everything would have been restored back to how the Victorians had it, we kind of sliced through it in ways that the Victorians would never do it. And one of the best examples is probably, like, say, the skylights cutting through the ceiling to the fire tower, which revealed this beautiful tower from the inside of the building, which the Victorians would never have done. So you're seeing place in a way that is repressed. It had been repressed before, and so we're revealing that, and so then suddenly it opens up a dialogue to think differently about it. And same with the garden, our relation to the garden.
I mean, that was tricky in our minds because it was such a colonial building and such a beautiful colonial building, but then this kind of pressure of how do you incorporate notions of country into this building and, provide the building to provide a filter that the visitor might explore the art and the program itself, the building as a colonial significant building, and then the elements of nature within the garden that open up this story about native plantings and birds and
I love that.
vegetation and all of that. And it took us a while to kind of almost juggle that, because we didn't. There was talk about, maybe we can embellish some of the walls with native timber, and we knew we didn't have the budget for that. So we were kind of thinking, how do we embrace that and, still provide it within the budget? So it became this idea of vistas. So looking through into different areas that made you think, oh, I'm looking at the native garden now, or I'm looking at the beautiful tower with it's kind of got an Italianate struts on it, or I'm looking at the permanent collection or the archive, So that became a really nice way of us to deal with that, which we hadn't really anticipated before we
Well,
started.
sort of what we did was reframing the Victorian. So the Victorian didn't become like this old ideology, it became something else.
This intention to reveal, but also dissect and cut in and unpack is a very sculptural approach.
It
really,
is,
as if you had started with a
And
whole
we-
block of marble and you
we
were...
kind of
Architecture is very much sort of sculpture inside art,
Yeah.
like
We
you
did
work
think
from
about
the inside.
it and it was from Marsha Langdon, who spoke about interweaving of histories, that we can't deny the colonial history, can't deny what the colonials did to the Indigenous population in Australia, and we have to kind of intertwine that with the Indigenous proposition to be really honest. It's like we can't knock down the building and start again because it was a heritage building and also all of that. But can we coexist in our knowledge of where we went wrong and how can we have a sense of repair moving forward?
Completely.
Which
As you say, talk about that intertwining. The image of the cover of Dimity Reed's Tangled Destinies book pops into my mind on the National Museum of Australia.
Oh, right, I forgot about that.
Yeah, well, it did come from the weaving of the Indigenous baskets and fish traps and so forth. But when I read her article, Marsha Langdon's article, it really hit home that that could be a way of spatially integrating it into a design rather than I'll just paint this wall with a particular pattern or whatever, which seems condescending, really.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just a...
Yeah.
It's one of the worst solutions to stick a mural on. But
It's like the old sort of boomerangs with tourist pictures on them.
The tourist boomerangs.
Yeah.
Truly, that title, though, Tangled Destinies, was so apt because our histories and our future and our present is so intertwined.
Yeah.
And that pluralism, almost from the school of more ideas, less refinement of Corrigan, is so important for good outcomes, for good buildings, for good public life.
And I think...
Yeah, you don't always have the budget for lots of good, beautiful detailing. You've just got to do good things that people can interact with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That notion of Australian architecture, I think, can really borrow from that description you just had, because it's not like one Australian architecture. It is this rich, intertwined hot pot of intelligent, creative people that are contributing to the built environment and that should be honoured. And maybe it will take 50 years to see the real outcome, but it's certainly, quite...
Maybe the future will give it a name.
Maybe it doesn't need a name.
Who's been your biggest mentor, and what's a lesson you're still carrying with you today?
Gee. You mean people we knew or just architects we liked? I mean, I think the architect that we both loved the most is probably Shinohara. You know.
Took my one.
Oh, sorry. Well, I mean,
perhaps one you knew personally that has been a
we
big
did go
influence
visit
in life.
him and everything, but
Oh wow!
so But,
I
God,
think-
I don't know.
Well, Corrigan in a strange way, because he had this personality that I could deal with, because my father was a bit like that, and not in a negative sense, but I was able to be in his presence and not feel diminished.
Terror.
You know. And he was actually quite good, you know, it's hard to believe, but he was quite good to me, even though, you know, I probably didn't have too much reason to be treated well. But I think you collect these little mentors along the way, and it could be, Shinohara is definitely a strong one when, say, we're designing the first house, and just that love of Japanese architecture.
Well, he keeps coming back, though. I mean, even the kind of methodology of, like his house under high voltage wires, where he had the high voltage wires and he drew the arcs around them, and that gave the crazy shape for the roof. And so that kind of methodology has been really important to us, I think.
It has.
I'm mindful of the time, so I do have to ask my last question, and that is, what gives you hope?
Well, I don't know, new music, like geese. I don't know.
Just waking up and the sun's up, and just feeling that there's another day to move forward, like, I don't know if it's anything particular, but it is this kind of sensibility that it's a privilege to be alive and to be making these things, and that gives you hope, I think.
Every day is a blessing. Thank you so much for joining me on the program, Anna and Toby.
Thanks, Ilana.
Yeah, thanks, Ilana.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me for another evening of radio architecture with Ilana Razbash. This live show was broadcast and recorded in the Radio Karim studio on Bunurong country. You can replay this show wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in and supporting community radio. Take care.
Yo, it's Cheapskate. You're listening to Radio Karim.